Alon, you spent 8 hours in a car with me. Aren't you sick of me already?
Dude, you got to get me out of here, man. I can't handle it anymore. Let's pick the winners and losers and go home.
My thoughts exactly. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Just Your Opinion Man. Derek Papa, Alon Desai filling in for Steven. Steven's going to join me on Saturday morning before the can't forget the
Yeah.
super Wildcard weekend extravaganza we got going on this weekend. 6 games. And Alon was already telling me before we hopped on here, you think the Niners are getting screwed by playing this early game on Saturday afternoon at 1:30?
It just doesn't feel they're the second best team in the NFC, and they're in the. I wouldn't say it's the worst slot. The worst slot's probably that Dolphins Bills game, which is Sunday at 10 a.m. But I mean, although everyone's used to waking up early to watch NFL football games, especially on the West Coast, but
And they get a
I
full
mean,
week.
and they get a full week. But the Niners are so damn good, and the Niners and Seahawks. It's a divisional rivalry. I don't know. It just seems like it deserves more closer to the top billing rather than here's your appetizer to get the rest of the stuff started. That being said, pretty damn good appetizer for all the NFL fans out there.
I would concur, and also I would say that, yeah, I would agree with you in the sense that the Niners wrap up the second best record in the NFC, but yet, I mean, Kyle kind of voiced his frustration. Didn't voice it, but sounded pretty agitated this week when he said, like, yeah, we found out that we were playing Seattle, and then we had to go straight to work. We lose a day.
Yeah.
So that's just kind of how it rolls. That's just how it is with the Super Wildcard weekend now, where the 2 seed is now going to have to play that weekend, which I liked it in the past. I don't, it was very interesting with everything going on with the Lions and the Packers. But honestly, like, do the Seahawks deserve to be in the playoffs? That's a question that, I mean, they had a good season, but I don't know if they're a playoff team. I liked it the way it was with 1 through 6 and the 2 top teams in each conference getting the buys, but that's just what we do now with everything, Mark Cuban's pigs get slaughtered line is not the case because the ratings are out through the roof and everybody will enjoy it. It's more football. People love it. But I think that we're tweaking with a good thing. But whatever. 6 games on this super wild card weekend. I'm good with it.
Yeah, no, I mean it's more football, and it should all be. I'm hoping it will all be good competitive football, and maybe the one you have to worry about the most is actually the first game, just between the Niners and the Seahawks. That might be the one where it's like the Niners have had their number this year, and that hasn't been the case for Pete Carroll and the Seahawks against the Niners. Pretty much
Even Pete Carroll's wondering how he's going to beat the Niners.
Yeah, I mean, I saw that little quip that he had where
totally taken overblown. Like this is good coaches gas up their opponents.
They do all the time. So I mean, let's keep it Bay Area centric here. Don Nelson did that about the Mavericks way back when, almost 15 years ago now. So yeah, I think the Niners, they're dominant. They have the best scoring differential in the NFL. So Pete Carroll knows what he's going up against. That being said, he knows how to beat the Niners. He doesn't know how to beat this Niners team because they haven't done it this year, but he knows how to beat that organization. But yeah, I just feel like the Niners are getting a little screwed there. I mean, you work that hard, you have that great of a season, and you're the one losing 24 hours of additional prep/rest time. And you got to wake up early on Saturday to go play a football game.
Yeah, they're kind of getting hosed a little bit, but it is what it is. We will talk about everything as far as the games this weekend. Steve and I are going to pick the games on Saturday, but I'll get Alon's picks before we get out of here. But we got some Week 18 games to discuss a little bit. We already know the outcomes, but we'll talk about the grand scheme of things as far as the NFL going forward and the offseason for some teams, including the Raiders. Derek Carr said his goodbyes today. We'll talk about that. A couple of jobs that have been opened up since last time we talked and interviews that are underway. But before we get into all of that with the NFL, Alon's a big college football guy. We had a good time. The weekend of New Year's, went to the Raider-Niner game and watched all the college football playoffs. Then we got to the national championship. And first of all, I haven't said this on the podcast to you, sir. Kudos to you and thank you for everything for getting me back to the Bay Area that day.
Oh, of course, dude. Not even a big deal. I'm glad I was able to do it, and I feel bad that happened to you because that really sucked. And it turned out to be the right decision. there were people not even able to get out until like Wednesday at the earliest.
So did you ever find out what was going on with Vegas Airport that night?
It's had something to do with what's been going on for the last week, because
With every airline, Southwest.
Yeah, with every airline. So I don't know if it's FAA with their tracking systems and not tracking where the planes are in the air, but in terms of keeping up with the scheduling. I mean, it's been a mess. But I do know this: when I was getting back in to Las Vegas the next day or whatever, right? There was traffic backed up for 20 to 40 miles outside of Las Vegas, just trying to get out of the city. So a lot of people were like, screw it, rent a car, try to drive. Everybody starts doing that at once. They're stuck on the road for 15 hours. And then people who decided to just wait it out and try to get a flight, a lot of them weren't leaving until Wednesday afternoon, some Thursday morning. So, I mean, for Niner fans who came and watched the game and enjoyed their time, hopefully they had more fun times for the next 2 or 3 days that they were stuck in the desert. But no, it worked out. So I was glad I was able to get you back to your stomping grounds.
Well, I appreciate that, sir. And I'm glad we left the time we did, because it could have been up Schitt's Creek for me. But it kind of reminds me of, that scene in Casino where the businessman is leaving Las Vegas and they do something to his flight where he can't leave on a private jet. So he's forced to come back. And Robert De Niro's like, sorry, what happened with your flight? No more gambling. No more gambling. And, of course, he goes back to the table and loses everything. So maybe it was a little more inside Vegas of why everybody was not able to go back to the Bay Area.
I was joking with a few people. I said, I wonder if the casinos didn't make their quota or whatever it was for the end of the year. So they're like, ground everything. People need to stay, and we need one more night of money here. So I mean, I'm sure that
would not be surprised. Would not be surprised. But the college football playoffs, we were watching the games, and after the TCU Michigan game, which was a fun game, but also a lot of points. Same thing with Georgia and Ohio State. But you mentioned to me, like, that shouldn't happen. TCU should not beat Michigan as far as the schools and everything. And Jim Harbaugh got a head start. I guess he's interviewing with the Denver Broncos. I guess he'll interview with the Colts. Jim should just stay in college at this point, in my opinion. But it came to, your opinion of the fact that it should have been Michigan and Georgia in the national championship was on full display, because, God, that was hard to watch. 65-7, Georgia it's the biggest beatdown I've ever seen in a championship game, professional, college. It was just too much. Stetson Bennett, I don't know what to make of him as far as a pro, but Georgia's got a great team, back-to-back national championships, the first back-to-back winners since your alma mater, Alabama, going in 2011 and 2012. So just your thoughts on the whole thing and how, maybe this is going to get even worse if we expand the college football playoff.
Georgia's incredible. Hats off to them. They had an awesome season, and they've been able to do it with a quarterback that not a lot of people, I mean, yeah, he's a winner, and we know that he can do the right things, but Stetson Bennett, man, he will go to the NFL. Now, that being said, he's not going to be a star somewhere, I don't think. He
could be someone's Brock Purdy.
He could, yeah, you never know. He could be someone's Brock Purdy. So that's pretty darn good, even if you are Mr. Irrelevant. But, yeah, it was 65-7, and watching that game, I was just – at first I was like, okay, so 10-7 ball game here in the first quarter, and I went, so when does TCU just start to crack? When do the cracks just, keep expanding, and all of a sudden the flood burst through, and it happened pretty quickly. There's just something about these powerhouse schools. Michigan's one of them, even though they weren't able to get through TCU. Ohio State's another one. Georgia's definitely one of them, where you might have really good skill players. There's players on TCU that will go to the NFL, and that's fine. But Georgia has almost an entire team of them. That's the first part, and their talent on the lines, both sides of the ball, offense and defense. They just bullied TCU off the ball every snap. Didn't matter what the situation was. It didn't look like it was going to be very complicated for Georgia, and it ended up not being. So, TCU got there, but for people to say, they're the number 2 ranked team in college football, yeah, they were, based off of, I would say, merit, because we're going with a merit-based system now. But it's kind of interesting because the college football committee and college football fans are always like, oh, well, we'll get the 4 best teams now. Well, we're still getting the number 2 team here, which was TCU, who had that great win over Michigan, but they don't belong in that top 5, top 6 conversation. They just don't in terms of your best players against another team's best players. They don't stack up. So kind of what you were saying, Derek, with the expanded playoffs, is it going to continue to ruin things? I mean, college football has a massive problem. They want parity, and they're not going to get it. And the problem is that you're not going to get parity in college football. The problem is that they're trying to continuously find ways to create said parity. And we kind of saw maybe the best case scenario for that this year. You saw TCU, a good football program with a really innovative coach in Sonny Dykes, go against a powerhouse in Georgia. And that's kind of the results you're gonna see. Everybody has this idea of Boise State versus like Oklahoma or something like that, but that wasn't for a national champion. That wasn't a game though. It was a great game, but you're not going to see that kind of stuff left and right. And it would have been incredible if TCU had been able to pull it out, but they're just not, because they're going to get dominated by 1st through 7 round draft picks on the interior of the offensive and defensive lines, and that's what happened. I mean, 65-7. It was bad.
I mean, it was the closest thing to our generation's like Niners beating the Broncos 59-10 in the Super Bowl. It was just hard to watch after a while.
I mean, what was the Derek? Maybe the last bad championship like that was Seahawks Broncos. That was the only thing I could think of.
Yeah, 48-3 or 43-8. Yeah, it was bad, but I mean, kudos to Georgia, and yeah, I think the alarming thing that people came away with is maybe college football doesn't want parity, because every year we get that one team. Cincinnati wasn't the case last year. Just that one team that everybody's like, yeah, they deserve it. Yeah, they deserve it, no question. But then we get a lot of stinkers of teams that are just not on the same level as far as talent. So it is what it is. It's not going to be a David versus Goliath situation. It's just going to be someone who's getting their ass kicked on national television.
Yeah, it's going to be Goliath, like in the old Looney Tunes, where someone gets picked up and they're, hit on the ground left and right over and over again. 100%. And so that's kind of what's going to happen. And as it continues to expand, it's just going to give more opportunities for the SEC and the Big Ten, and then your random 1 or 2 ACC teams every year to really dominate. And you'll have the nice TCU stories, stuff like that, but they will eventually get beat just through pure athletic ability and fundamental soundness by the other teams. The other teams are just more talented.
Yeah, no. I was texting a buddy though, saying that it was the day after the Patriots were eliminated from the playoffs, and Nick Saban was sitting on the desk for the pregame show and postgame show, and everybody shows the clip of David Pollock saying Georgia's now the height of the college football dog, and everybody shows the slow motion of Nick Saban's like turning to his left and just being like, this motherfucker. But I was joking with a friend, just being like Belichick and Nick Saban just texting each other, being like, everyone thinks we're old. Everybody thinks we're washed up. Things will be, Belichick and Saban not making their collective postseasons. They'll be back next year with a vengeance, in my opinion.
I agree. And I think the Patriots were some decent quarterback play. Maybe I shouldn't even say decent. I should just say consistently healthy quarterback play throughout the entire season, away from maybe punching their ticket to the playoffs. That's number one. And then I want to take it back to college football here. As far as Alabama goes, the 2 years in a row, not able to win a national championship, and Georgia is on top of the mountain right now. But, it's tough to stay there. Clemson went through it where it looked like, oh man, they're world beaters, and they changed everything. And, that was a nice 3 or 4 years for them. And, they're now trying to figure out how to get back to the top again, and Alabama's kind of just stays right there at the base camp, waiting to always go back up. And maybe that's Georgia too now. Maybe Georgia's right there with them now, with Kirby Smart as their head coach running that program, where it's just going to be those two trying to figure out who's got it, and then Urban Meyer, wherever he goes, he'll go get one too.
Yeah. As far as the NFL in the last week of the season, week 18, a lot of things changed. I'll get your opinions about the AFC playoff structure now, with that game with the Bengals and the Bills not being played. But it took away from, I guess the fun between the three teams, the Bengals, Bills, and Chiefs, as far as who was to get the 1 seed, because as soon as that game was not played, it was kind of set in stone that the Chiefs are going to get the 1 seed. Not to say that they weren't going to lose to the Raiders, but it just kind of took the intrigue away, where the Chiefs we're going to, if they beat the Raiders and it puts the pressure on the Bills the next day to get that 1 seed. I understand everything that went down, and obviously it was a great scene in Buffalo with the fans, celebrating Damar Hamlin and him getting released from the hospital. He's out now. He's going to go back and keep living his life, and it's a great story. And it riled up, the Bills Mafia. Naeem Hines takes the opening kickoff back, but it did kind of. I mean, obviously what happened with Damar Hamlin was terrible, but the way the NFL kind of, just then all right, this is what we're gonna do things now on the neutral site. We'll get all to that. But as far as the Chiefs and Raiders game that happened on Saturday, we knew. I mean, Jarrett Stidham played great against the Niners, but it was hard to replicate that again the next week against the Chiefs. The Chiefs were playing for so much, and just like I said, the fact that they won that game that day, and then the Bills and Bengals were playing for second seed. I didn't like. I don't like the idea of the Bills having a great season this year, beating the Chiefs in the regular season. That should count for something. And now they have to play as a second seed. But maybe, honestly, it may motivate them even more to keep playing and to, kind of, in the past, teams that get the 1 seed, it benefits you a lot, but also just some teams just get hungrier that way. So, yeah, just as far as the Raider game, the Raiders season is over. I don't want to focus too much on the game itself, but Jarrett Stidham kind of showed me a little bit that he is the backup quarterback. Did not have a great game against the Chiefs. Everyone's making a big deal about the ring around the Rosie formation. It was cute. It was fun. I don't take anything away from creativity with coaches. Andy Reid, great coach. I love his creativity. I didn't get the whole ring around the Rosie thing. I thought it was just people are like, oh, he's just toying with the Raiders. And Josh McDaniels wasn't offended by it. I think it was just them trying to line up before a play, and everyone was confused. Jerick McKinnon lined up as the quarterback, and Patrick Mahomes lined up to the right as a wide receiver. Play didn't even count. It was called back later, but yeah, I mean, I think that game pretty much showed that the Raiders have a lot to work to do on defense, and that Jarrett Stidham, while he's a solid, quarterback that understands Josh McDaniels' offense, he's not the guy going forward.
I agree with all those points, and with that unique coming out of the huddle, the ring around the Rosie is what it's being called. Seeing it live, I was just very. I went, wow, that's a great idea, because it's got to be a pain in the ass for the linebackers and the safeties to account for where everybody's at, and the offensive line comes out so smooth, just lines up right there, and you can kind of hide some things for a moment or two, and that looks like what the Chiefs accomplished with that. Obviously, the play didn't count, but that's something they have in their back pocket, and Andy Reid's got about 100 plays in his back pocket that he can run in the short red zone anytime he wants. But about Jarrett Stidham, yeah, he showed that he's a backup, and that's okay. That's fine. I mean, there were people who wanted to kind of anoint him as, they don't even need to go get a guy in free agency. Well, that's not true. Jarrett Stidham had a great performance, a really good performance, a gutsy performance against an amazing Niner team, maybe the best team in the NFL, depending on who you ask. And he came back down to earth like most, punchy backups do. When they play another really good team back-to-back, they usually come back down and kind of play to their own abilities, and that's what Jarrett Stidham did. He didn't look awful, but he didn't look like world beater either, and he didn't look like the answer. So pretty cut and dry. I don't think there's much you can take out of that game. Anything else besides those 2 points? Maybe a third point. This is Kansas City wanted to win that game so much more than the Raiders did, and I'm not saying the Raiders as professionals didn't want to win a ball game, because of course they did, but they didn't have anything to play for. So the team who's got more juice going in, and especially when they're as talented as Kansas City is, I mean, they're going to dominate, and that's what they did. So kudos to the Chiefs, and it still does kind of, I don't know, it does when you're talking about the scheduling and obviously everything that happened with Damar Hamlin, and then we get things playing out the way they do. To me, it just felt like, and I'm not going to go Skip Bayless mode here, he got absolutely torched, but it didn't feel like the NFL exactly had a plan. Now, I don't know how you do plan for something like that, but it just seemed like the NFL was like kind of firing from the hip, and I don't know, just expect maybe something a little more controlled and thought out of by the league, that is the most important league in American sports. So they just, I think they did the best of what they could, but it did kind of take some of the intrigue out of some of the results last week.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, also it was still, interesting to see whether or not the Bills were going to be the 2 seed or the Bengals were going to be the 3 seed. But all three of those teams were deserving. The Bengals, It was a long shot, but the Bills were right there to get that 1 seed. So now because of that, it goes Chiefs 1, Bills 2, Bengals 3. Jaguars with a great game on Saturday night. Hung in there. Josh Dobbs did the best he could, but I think just the inexperience, it wasn't enough for them offensively. It showed by them firing Todd Downing, former Raiders offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
But the Jaguars defense just made a huge play in the end with the safety blitz from Rashad Jenkins causing the fumble, and Josh Allen takes it in. So the Jaguars win that AFC South division championship, and they are the 4 seed. And then the Chargers are the 5 seed. Ravens are the 6 seed, and the Dolphins are the 7th seed by winning that game against the Jets. Skylar Thompson sounds like he's going to play again this weekend, and that kind of takes the luster away of that matchup. But yeah, as far as the AFC playoffs go, I think it's an interesting slate of games, and the NFC as well. We'll get to all that. As far as the other Week 18 games, and there was a lot of intrigue here or there as far as the seedings. We'll talk about the coach firings and whether or not Lovie Smith was fired for winning that game against the Colts, which kind of puts the Colts in a good position to get Bryce Young. We'll see, though. The Bears get the number 1 pick. We'll talk all about that a little later. The Lions and Packers game, that was interesting. And we didn't know how it was going to be with the scenario with if the Seahawks beat the Rams, then that takes the Lions out of the playoff picture. So they have nothing to play for, really, except for knocking the Packers out of the playoffs. And I commend Dan Campbell and the rest of the Lions, especially Jamal Williams. Don't let these fears these tears fool you. It's all dog in this mug. Great line. They wanted to play for something, and they had motivation in the fact that they just wanted to get Aaron Rodgers and the Packers out of the playoffs. So I thought it was a great performance by them. I think they're going to be a great team going forward. We'll talk more and more about the future of Aaron Rodgers, but I was very impressed with the Lions, and I think they're going to be probably, we'll see what happens with the Vikings, but going forward, I think they're going to be probably maybe the best and, having the most talent and the most younger roster amongst the other teams in the NFC North.
They definitely might have also the best leader, like the guy
Dan Campbell,
the guy who motivates people to do things that maybe they couldn't do if he wasn't there. And if that's the case, he's a phenomenal leader, and that's what it looks like. They won 9 games this season, the Lions, and able to beat the Packers, have a better record than the Packers. That doesn't happen very often. It hasn't happened very often in my lifetime, but the Lions are right there. And, I also got to tip my hat to Jared Goff, because that's a guy very much like Kirk Cousins, who he now shares a division with, but that's a guy very much like Kirk Cousins, who a lot of people shit on. A lot of people say, oh, he's this good and he can't get it any more done for you. He's got a really, he's got a high ground, but a very low ceiling kind of guy. But, Jared Goff has kind of taken all that criticism and just rolled with it. And he's done what that Lions team has needed him to do. You shouted out Jamal Williams, and you owe him for sure for the week before. So congratulations on that.
Fantasy. The champ, baby. It came to our league.
Fantasy champ for Derek Papa. But no, the Lions kind of ruining the Green Bay Packers party. And I think you and I were maybe texting about that a while. We're talking about it on the drive back, the 8-hour football talk we had on the drive back. But if the Lions even had a shot in that game, and it was like, the Lions play with a lot of pride, but you can't see Aaron Rodgers losing to the Lions to not make the playoffs. Well, that's what ended up happening. And unfortunately for the Lions, they don't get in, but they can still say, hey, we had a pretty darn good season, and we can build upon it. So kudos to them. I thought that was a really good matchup. I think the other matchup that was really interesting Week 18 was Ravens-Bengals, and it became more interesting once the scheduling came out that we're just going to get a rematch of Ravens Bengals 2 weeks in
thank
a
God it
row.
didn't come down to that coin toss. That was
Yeah,
just
that would have been yes, but
that's like to quote my father, this is $1 billion industry, and this is how you're deciding things. Like when he was talking about Gene Steratore, the index card.
yeah,
You
the
can't
index card.
you can't have a fucking coin toss determine a playoff game. That's ridiculous to me. But
Or
luckily we didn't have that. Anthony Brown, I want to say, was the quarterback for the
he was
Ravens.
he was Baltimore's
He might
quarterback.
even have to go this weekend because Lamar Jackson sounds like he's out. I mean, like we're getting a lot of good matchups, but also a lot of quarterbacks that are going to be out.
Lamar says the knee is unstable. I think those are his words,
Yeah,
and some people are saying, "Oh, well, what does that mean about him and his Ravens future?" And I'm like, don't even think about that. It just means that he can't do the things that he needs to
yeah.
do on the football field.
I
That's
would
all that
say
means.
I've seen some people insinuate that he is trying to not play in this game because of the contract situation. I don't believe that for a second. Um, and I think it's just going to be the fact that he's hurt, and this may hurt him in the offseason as far as the contract, but we'll see how that goes. But I'm assuming it's going to be Tyler Huntley. A lot of backups. We get, Skylar Thompson playing. Brock Purdy's played great, but he'll be starting this weekend too. So a lot of interesting quarterback matchups. But as far as the Lions, they finished extremely strong, and I think that's going to propel them to have a better 2023. And that was kind of the finish we were hoping with the Raiders. We were
Mm.
hoping that even though they had a shitty start to the season, they would have a strong finish, and that wasn't the case. And now I ask you, Alon, now that the season's over, 6-11, with all the expectations, Devontae Adams, Chandler Jones, competing with what was supposed to be a strong AFC West, was this, in your opinion, as far as you've been watching Raider football, the most disappointing season you've watched from the Raiders?
Ooh. You know what? Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's any other way to put it. It is the only season that was worse than this was maybe post Super Bowl to Tampa Bay
2003?
to 2003. But then you can say things like, well, the starting quarterback got injured, and
Oh, yeah, we had Rick Meyer and Marcus Tuiasosopo
yeah,
going.
so that's like ancient history now. But for sure, this very disappointing, and I think it's incredibly disappointing from a fan standpoint for a lot of the fans out there who look at the team and go, "You just had the best receiver in the NFL and the best running back in the
Mm-hmm.
NFL, and you won 6 games with it, and you have a guy who." Definitely is a Pro Bowler on the defensive line. He's not on the All Pro team, but he's a Pro Bowler and he played really well and led the league in tackles for loss. So
He may. So what was released earlier this week was just the NFL players choosing the All
players,
Pro team. We will get the AP All Pro team, and we may see Max Crosby on that list. But I'm assuming we're going to see Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs on that too.
I figured that if there was one that uh, Crosby was going to make, it would have been this initial one,
Mm-hmm.
but just because the sack numbers weren't that gaudy,
Right.
that's why. But I mean, you have 3 All-Pro caliber players, only one on defense and then 2 on offense, and you just come with 6 wins out of it. So yeah, are they pressing the reset button from an organizational standpoint? They definitely have with McDaniels and Ziegler, and they're going to do so once again from a roster standpoint. Not so much offensively; they just need a quarterback, pretty much. Looks
Yeah.
and maybe a guard or two, but defensively, I mean, Max Crosby cleaned out his locker the other day, and a lot of the other guys did too, and a lot of them were pretty much kind of coming to grips with the fact that they're not going to be back. So Crosby kind of had some comments about, these are the I've played with for 3 different head coaches, 3 different coordinators, and a million different teammates is what he said. And he said we're going to have I'm going to have more defensive teammates here. And he also kind of said, I've worked too hard for these to be the results, kind of thing. That was kind of the line he gave, something along those lines. So, yeah, I mean, extremely disappointing. But that being said, a lot of cap space, and the problems are not hard. I shouldn't say they're not hard ones to fix. They're not hard ones to find. They're easy problems to identify. They just have to get players in to fix the problems, and therein, lies the rub. So Dave Ziegler has to get to work, identify players that fit the schemes, and then you hope you have a better year next year.
Yeah, I mean, I think of seasons in the past, like the 2003 season where they were coming off the Super Bowl and they got older fast. That was just a reality check. It
Mm-hmm.
was, time to move on from the Rich Gannons and the Jerry Rices and the Tim Browns. And 2017, coming off the playoff season where it was so disappointing that Derek Carr broke his ankle, it just sucked to follow that season up with just the remaining seasons we had in Oakland with a stinker like that. And then they got hope with John Gruden, but then the team moved to Vegas, and then everything that happened last season. But this was supposed to be a big move, going to Vegas. This was supposed to be the high profile. You make the upgrades, you get Devontae Adams, you get Chandler Jones, you get Josh McDaniels, and this is supposed to build upon the season of a year ago where they went to the playoffs and lost to the Cincinnati Bengals. And it just turned out that way. And a lot of teams were in the same boat this season. I think the Colts were a disappointment. The Broncos were a disappointment. The Rams were sure as hell a disappointment. Packers were a disappointment. Buccaneers, even though they make the playoffs, disappointing season.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say this is probably up there. This is probably one of the more disappointing Raiders seasons of all time. And it was also kind of a reality check of how the future will go with the organization and what they thought of Derek Carr. And me and Steven talked about David Carr's comments and how he's just being kind of a brother and everything. But also, you got to be unbiased a little bit if you're going to be a media member.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it was a mix of them trying to go for something, but also them trying to evaluate their roster. And it's pretty clear that the defense needs an overhaul and the quarterback position needs an overhaul. Not to say that Derek Carr couldn't have figured things out with Josh McDaniels, but they're not willing to wait and they're not willing to pay him the amount of money that was going to be on his contract. So we all know the story by now. Derek Carr was benched for the last 2 games, and that is to mainly, I understand changing the quarterback position, seeing what you have in Jarrett Stidham, but it's pretty clear that Jarrett Stidham is not the guy. So they wanted to preserve Derek for the offseason because they have a quick deadline of getting him off the roster. And Derek spoke today. He took to Twitter to talk about his farewell to the Raiders, and this is what he said. Raider Nation, it breaks my heart I didn't get an opportunity to say goodbye in person. We certainly have been on a roller coaster in our 9 years together. From the bottom of my heart, I am so grateful and appreciative of the years of support you gave to me, to my family, and me. We had our share of both heartbreaking moments and thrilling game-winning drives, and always felt like you were there next to me. It's especially hard to say goodbye because I can honestly say that I gave you everything I had, every single day, in season and in the off-season. It certainly wasn't perfect, but I hope that I was able to leave you with with a few great memories as Raider fans. He adds, thank you to the city of Oakland for taking us in. Thank you to the city of Las Vegas for allowing us to proudly call you home. Thank you to the organization, my teammates, all my coaches, staff, and everyone that helped me these last 9 seasons in those 2 buildings. Thanks to all of Raider Nation that supported, encouraged, pushed, and uplifted me at different times along this journey. Raider Nation truly is special. I once said that if I'm not a Raider, I would rather be at home, and I meant that. But I never envisioned it ending this way. That fire burning inside of me to win a championship still rages. A fire no man can extinguish, only God. So I look forward to a new city, a new team, who, no matter the circumstance, will get everything I have. Winning a championship is what I've always wanted and what I will continue to work towards. God bless you all with love, DC4. So nice words. And I'm not surprised. It makes me wonder though if things were handled correctly, would he have retired? And I seriously doubt that. But Derek Carr, yeah, I think Derek Carr, he had his time with the Raiders, and I think it was a pretty good 9 seasons. I wish that things were handled a little more, cordially, I guess, between Mark Davis and him, with everything he's been through in the organization, putting up with so much crap from the rebuilds to him having to explain things as far as John Gruden and Henry Ruggs. He was the face of the franchise, and a lot of guys crapped on him. But good guy. Was he the best quarterback? No, he was not. But I would say for all of the other quarterbacks that were a part of this organization prior to him, the Jamarcus Russells, God.
You want to get into Dante Culpepper, Jamarcus Russell, Jason Campbell? There's quarterbacks.
They were just searching for a quarterback for so long, and it just kept them stable for a little while. I know they didn't have the best records. They only went to 2 playoffs during his time as quarterback, but it was just, I don't know. I didn't like the way it was handled in the end, and I was really hoping he would have had a chance to say goodbye. So I understand his hard feelings towards everything in the end, and maybe he'll get his day when he retires in front of the Raider Nation and everything, and a proper send off. But I think it's best for both parties to go their separate ways, and now they'll have to find a new, a trade partner for Derek Carr before February 15th.
So they have to find a trade partner. Back to his statement, handles. I mean, the one thing about Derek Carr, is he a fringe? Is he a top 15, kind of between 15 and number 10 quarterback in the league? Yeah, that's pretty much what he's been his whole career,
Yeah.
and that's fine. You can be a really good player and make a great living doing that and win a lot of games. 63 and 79 with the Oakland/Las Vegas Raiders. So it was time for a change there. So I think he handled it very well, and I didn't blame him when he wanted to step away from the team for the last 2 weeks either, because that would leave a bad taste in your mouth. You feel like you've given an organization everything you possibly can, and it's not reciprocated. But they're going to have to trade him 3 days post Super Bowl. So there's a couple of scenarios. Number one, he doesn't get traded, and they're just going to have to cut him outright.
Mhm.
Or they could be friendly to each other and extend his that clause in the contract out into March. So when the new league year begins, that way they have some more flexibility on when to trade him. And what's that, Derek?
Well, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but it
Oh,
sounds like Vic Tafer reported that will not be the case.
yeah. So that doesn't look like that's going to happen. And I think part of that's definitely due to Karn, his agent, who, with the statement that he gave today on social media, I kind of looked at it and went, it doesn't tank his trade value, but it possibly does poke some holes in the idea that a team that really wants him is going to have to trade for him. In some ways, this might force the Raiders' hands to just have to cut him, unless it only takes one team out there who says we need him or we want him right now, and we're not willing to risk it on the open market. So, it's weird. He's not doing the organization any favors. The organization hasn't done him any favors either. So it's interesting. This is about the nastiest of a split up you could see between an organization and a player like Derek Carr, and it'd probably be a lot worse if Derek Carr wasn't the kind of character and leader that he is. So he's handling it very well, but yeah, we'll see where things go. I still think he's going to be traded. I don't think he's going to be cut outright. But even if he is cut outright, that tells me, with statements like he made today, that he thinks he can get more money per year than he was getting on this previous contract.
Do you think that,
with less strings attached? Real quick,
Yeah.
I wanted to put that in there too. With less strings attached, not as many outs for the organization.
Yeah, I mean, trades that have been done before the new league year have happened without a deadline. So
Yeah.
Alex Smith has been traded twice during Super Bowl time. He was traded to the Chiefs and he was traded to the Washington then Redskins. And then we saw a couple years ago, Matthew Stafford was traded to the Rams. I think the week before the Super Bowl, during Pro Bowl week, he was traded. And then Carson Wentz, I want to say, was traded to the Colts a couple weeks later.
Yes.
But I don't think I've ever seen it where there was a deadline 3 days after the Super Bowl. So this ramps things up, and the feasibility of it, I think, decreased of this getting done because of the Chicago Bears getting the first pick in the draft. So we'll talk about the ramifications of Lovie Smith getting fired and everything. But with the Chicago Bears getting the number one pick, they are in the catbird seat, I think is the term, as
Yeah.
far as that was always a weird saying.
I've
They
never
are-
understood it
I
either.
don't
Yeah.
get it either. But just as far as them sitting pretty, they're in the best position as far as the draft. They could easily take somebody they want, or most likely they're going to trade down and get more picks because from everything, every indication, they seem to be cool with Justin Fields going forward. So now you could do a deal with so many different teams that are quarterback needy. The Houston Texans at number 2. They need a quarterback. Number 4, the Indianapolis Colts. They sure as hell need a quarterback. I don't think they want to go the route. Everyone's talking about Derek Carr to the Colts. I don't think they want to go the route again of trading for another veteran quarterback. They want to start fresh and draft somebody. So I think that takes the Colts off the list. The Seattle Seahawks. We'll see what happens with Geno Smith, but he is a free agent this offseason, and you wonder if they want to upgrade the quarterback position as well. Raiders are number 7. We'll see what they do as far as the quarterback position. I doubt they want to trade up to go to number 1, but they'll probably get the best quarterback available maybe at number 7, depending on what they do. We're hearing about Tom Brady, and Albert Breer pretty much said that's a given this offseason that they want to go for him. Number 8, the Atlanta Falcons. Number 9, the Carolina Panthers. You got the Tennessee Titans at 11. You got the Houston Texans again at 12, and you got the New York Jets at 13. So my thing is, you have so many teams in the top 15 that need a quarterback. That what's the rush? You can wait until the offseason and see what you get, and if you don't like what you got, then you could trade up with whatever team, maybe the Chicago Bears, to get the quarterback you want in the draft. So I think that the Bears getting the number 1 pick really hurt the Raiders as far as trying to find a quarterback team that is desperate enough to trade with them before the new league year.
I think it didn't help, and I think that's a really good analysis and breakdown of the situation, because it definitely didn't help. It didn't do the Raiders any favors. But I think with a quarterback who is proven to put up good statistics and not be the issue with a team, I still think that even with about 9 teams that are, very quarterback needy, I think it only takes 1 or 2 of them to say, you know what, let's just lock up a trade and figure it out. I don't think you're going to have to give up a first-round pick for Derek Carr. I don't think anybody's suggesting that either. No. I think it would be something maybe like a second and possibly a 4th or something like that, or a conditional pick in a year after. But yeah, it definitely doesn't help. I don't see the Raiders trading all the way up to 1. I don't see them trading into the top 3. I don't see that. The Bears, the craziest thing they could do is trade away Justin Fields, which I'm not suggesting that they do this. I don't think they should do it. Is they could trade him away and then draft Bryce Young, but then you're kind of doing what the Cardinals did with the whole Josh Rosen, Kyler Murray situation. A little bit different, but you don't want to be one of those teams that does that. And so I don't see them doing that. I also think it's very fascinating that the Texans could flip-flop. They could go up, and then the Bears could even trade back once again if they work all that stuff out, because they don't need to take a quarterback. So I'm not saying that's likely to happen, but the Texans, I could very well see them either sitting and just standing pat and saying, look, we're going to force you, Chicago, to use that first-round draft pick on either a player you don't need right now, a quarterback, or someone who's not a quarterback. But teams like the Houston Texans have to be worrisome and go, crap, what if another team decides to trade up with Chicago? Then we're screwed, and we don't have our quarterback. Yeah, Colts. What if the Colts decide to – yeah, exactly. So what if the Colts decide to do that? So the Bears are going to have there's a very likely scenario that they trade with one of these teams down, and they have a lion's share of picks, not just for this year, but a few pretty nice picks the year after as well.
Yeah, I mean, like if you're the Houston Texans, like what's going to cost you to move up one spot?
It's an important spot, though, and the problem is, their problem isn't so much that they think the Bears might take the guy that they want, and we're operating from the assumption that they want Bryce Young, but it's about the teams behind them that might leapfrog them, and so that's the tough part.
So if you're the Houston Texans, is it worth it to give up 2 first-round picks to move up one spot? No.
Yes.
But
interesting.
No. Well, I mean, yes and no. It is, but also that's going to hurt your franchise going forward. As far as the Colts, it's justified in how, the difference in the amount of picks. You go from 1 to 4, 4 to 1. So, again, we have all offseason to talk about the draft, but I think as far as the draft, how it went out and how so many teams that could use a quarterback are now going to be in a sweepstakes to get that first pick or wherever they want to go, I think that hurt the Raiders, except for one. One team that does not have a first-round pick is the New Orleans Saints. And this is going to be my trade proposal. So we'll still have weeks. I don't think Derek Carr is getting traded anytime soon, and he very well could not be traded. But I think this is the best case scenario that I would think as far as what's going to happen with Derek Carr. So a lot of quarterback teams, as I read before, have first-round picks. A lot of people are saying the New York Jets, I don't really know what's going to go on with that. It sounds as if they're going to try to upgrade and get someone to compete with Zach Wilson. I thought it was going to be Jimmy Garoppolo. It very well could be still, but they fired Mike LaFleur, longtime offensive coordinator. Well, I shouldn't say long time. but used to be with the Niners and went on with Robert Saleh. So you thought that was going to be a match with Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't know if they're going to be interested in him now, given firing Mike LaFleur. Um, as far as but they could very well Jets could be interested in Derek Carr. I still this is an old school mentality thing, but I wonder if maybe the Raiders want to do a trade with an NFC team just
Mm.
because of you don't want to see Derek Carr in your conference again. But then again, that's something that I don't think many teams are worried about anymore. I think it's more divisions. Like you want to trade, like DeAndre Hopkins is a trade, rumor out there, but the Rams are going to trade for DeAndre Hopkins. That'd be stupid for the Cardinals to do that. So I think I think the trade that makes the most sense is, Andy Dalton's going to be a free agent. It sounds like the Saints are not in on Jameis Winston after benching him for most of the season. They have a good roster as far as young players and a good defense, but the thing they're missing the most is quarterback.
Mhm.
I would not be the least bit surprised if it was the New Orleans Saints that tried to make the trade for Derek Carr. And I don't really know this for sure, but of course, the coach that drafted Derek Carr initially with the Raiders was Dennis Allen. I don't know if he is a Carr fan. He only coached him for 4 games after being fired from that London game against the Miami Dolphins. But he knows Derek Carr, and they don't really have a lot of room to figure out the quarterback situation in the draft. So I could see the Saints being desperate enough to trade for Derek Carr. And if I was the Raiders, this is what I would offer. If you want Derek Carr, I would want a 2023 third round pick, a 2023 fifth round pick, your 2024 fourth round pick, and to take this contract off the books, I would want Michael Thomas. If you can negotiate a way to get 1 year off the contract, because
Mm.
it's pretty expensive right now after this season. He just restructured his contract, would it cost like $1 million, and that's going to cost like a shit ton of money after that. So, but if you can find a way to cheapen the contract and give up those 3 picks plus Michael Thomas to pair up with Devontae Adams, I would make that deal.
I would too, and I don't think there'd be a person around who would look at. I mean, it would be good for both parties. New Orleans wants to get rid of that Michael Thomas contract. Like, it's a bad penny. They want to get rid of it. They don't want it to keep turning up. As far as the Raiders getting that kind of a haul back, that would be an incredible haul. If I was them, I'd even sell for less because for them, it's really just about not paying dead money. They don't want to pay dead money for Carr when he's not on the roster, and just getting something back. So if they got anything close to that, that would be remarkable. I think there's a couple of other teams that are.
Sorry, but do you think I'm asking too much for this?
I think you're maybe 2 picks too much.
Okay,
maybe. But I don't know. I don't know how much the Saints really view getting rid of that Thomas contract as a big boon for them. So,
the Raiders would do them a solid by getting rid of that.
They would. And so if that's that high on their priority list, which it appears that it is a pretty big priority for that ownership group, then something like that could be worked out. But I definitely think 2 picks in the initial year that you trade them is definitely viable. I don't think that's over asking. I think the other team that's very interesting in the conversation could be Seattle, but I could also see Seattle being the kind of team that is very patient and just waits instead of trading for him. But they could also swing a trade for him as well because they would see him as an obvious upgrade over Geno Smith, which I don't think anybody's arguing about that, whether Derek Carr's an upgrade over Geno, even though Geno's had a good year this year and Derek had the second worst year of his career. But, there's some options. Some people have floated Tampa Bay. I'm not saying that couldn't happen, but I don't see Tampa trading for him is I guess what I'm trying to say here.
The timeline sucks because Tampa would have to know that Tom Brady's not coming back.
Tom Brady's not coming back, if they were going to even be doing something like that, that means in their minds, Tom's not coming back.
Yeah.
The other team that I think we were all kind of hotter on when the news first came out that the Carr era was kind of done with the Raiders was the Washington Commanders. But now stuff like that is looking kind of iffy. So, and the Colts, I agree with you 100%. They're out of the picture because they need a full reset at that position. They can't go for another older, even though he would be younger than the last 2 guys. They can't go for another older guy because they've gone from Rivers to Ryan and then to Carr, and it's like when do they just get their guy, draft them, and develop them and see what they have? So, there's options on the table for teams, but the Raiders are in a position where they're at the, kind of at the behest, they're at the mercy of other teams. And so other teams are either going to come knocking on the door, offering them a trade, or it's going to be a trade the Raiders don't like, and they'll say no. That being said, I really don't think there's a trade the Raiders don't like for Derek Carr. Their whole goal is to not pay any money and get, even if it's just one or two things back for them, they'll take it.
No, I agree with you. The Raiders are a little more desperate in the situation.
Yep.
And the way they're going about it, I think, is smart. Getting picks back for a quarterback that's on the roster that will be sought after. However, though, if you go and we know about the rumors with Albert Breer brought up that we all kind of guessed it as soon as Derek Carr was not going to come back to the Raiders, was that Josh McDaniels wants Tom Brady. And I think that's the case. I think that they're going to try to go all in on Tom Brady. We'll see how Tom finishes out this season with Tampa Bay. But I think we're all assuming that he's done, whatever happens this playoffs. My thing is, though, is that you're seeing what's happening with the Rams right now. And it sounds like Sean McVay is contemplating leaving the Rams, which I'm kind of surprised at. But I guess if you look at everything, they're kind of screwed. They're -3 as far as salary cap going into this offseason. I thought they were going to be able to reset the salary cap, but with all those guaranteed contracts, it doesn't look like they're going to be able to. So they got Matthew Stafford, they got, Cooper Kupp and Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey all making top dollar. And it sounds like they're going to try to go through a rebuild. I don't know how that's possible, but that's what they're going to do this offseason. And Sean McVay, I guess, is wondering if he wants to even be a part of it and, wants to deal with the headache of another, subpar season. And would it just be more beneficial for him to go do television? You're also seeing with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they went all in to get Tom Brady, and now they'll probably have to do a gigantic rebuild now that once he leaves. So the teams that went all in on their quarterback position this past offseason or a couple seasons ago, Tom Brady, Matthew Stafford, Russell Wilson, the Browns with Deshaun Watson. A lot of teams may regret those decisions because they just said fuck them picks and went to go get the quarterback of their future. And if it doesn't pan out, then you're screwed. I just hope the Raiders have a long-term goal. Even if it is Tom Brady for one season, you got to find another quarterback that's going to make them relevant past that point. It can't just be the focus is all on getting a Super Bowl next season in Las Vegas. And I know that's what the Rams did, 100%. They did everything they could to win that season at SoFi Stadium because that Super Bowl was going to be played in LA. And the mission accomplished. They got it done. But as far as the long-term goals, they're screwed.
Yeah.
I don't want to see the Raiders in the same position.
It's reminiscent of what's going on with the Rams and kind of what Sean McVay about him going into TV for a little while and taking a little sabbatical. It reminds me a lot of what Sean Payton had just done with New Orleans because it looked like they were going to be in the salary cap hell of all salary cap hells. He said, to heck with this. I'm gone. My quarterback's done. I'll wait for another job or I'll retire. Sean McVay could be doing the same thing. The interesting part about Sean McVay's situation, though, is you got some pretty good, they're aging pillars, but you still have good pillars on that team to build around. But the rest of the roster is just, it's awful. And it's clear that they can't compete with the Niners right now. They can't compete with the Seattle Seahawks. And I would still put them above Arizona on any given Sunday, but they're kind of down at the bottom there with them. And after a horrible season, and they mortgaged everything for that Super Bowl. And we've had this conversation before, and I know you and Steven have as well, where of course you do that every day of the week. If you have an opportunity to get a Super Bowl, especially in your home city, and you think you can go all in to go win it, you go do it. With the Raiders, with regards to them, I think getting Tom Brady is a really good stopgap. And I think out of all the stopgaps you could ever have, that might be the best of all time, right? And so let's just say you only get 1 year out of Brady. I think there's a scenario where you get 2 out of him. But let's just say it's just 1. You're not going to have to give up a lot of capital to get him. Yes, you're going to end up spending money, but it's not going to be a gaudy amount of money for 1 year because he's never been that guy to take those kinds of deals or force those kinds of deals. So you're going to have more money to spread around the rest of the roster. And here's the thing. This is what's going to be very telling. Do they load it up with aging veterans who are still at the end, who are at the end of their prime, or are they going to kind of do a little bit of a mix and then infuse a lot of talent with the draft? Who knows? Because you don't know if the draft turns out well or not. But if they go in and they go get Tom Brady and they spend the rest of the money and with their entire war chest on just getting Pro Bowl level defensive talent who's older, then that would signal that they're going all in for 1 year, and the wheels could fall off after that 1 year. So regardless of whether they draft a quarterback or not for the future, even if Tom Brady is the stopgap, they would still be in roster hell. So it might not be the most prudent strategy, but they've been here for 3 seasons, here being Las Vegas. They've made the playoffs once. That's not acceptable. I think this is a very, and I think Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler's whole vision, along with the ownership, Mark Davis, I think it's very narrow and it's very short-sighted. And I'm not saying that in a bad way, denigrating them. I think it's all about this next year and trying to just figure out this year, and then we'll worry about next year. And luckily for them, they don't have to fuck them picks to get the guy that they want. That's probably the biggest difference between this situation and situations in the past. They don't have to do what Cleveland has done, and they definitely don't have to do what the Rams did.
No, that's true. That's very true. So we will see what happens this offseason, what the Raiders pursued as far as quarterback and everything else on the roster. But some of the coaching decisions that were made, I guess they don't call it Black Friday anymore, but that's what it is. And while coaches lose their jobs, it's very sad, and families have to move and everything. A lot of these guys get long-term deals. They get to, sit on the money, which is kind of nice.
I can hear your heart breaking, Derek. I can hear the cracks starting to develop. Oh no, you don't have your job.
Well, I mean, that does suck, and I do understand, what it looks like with David Culley and Lovie Smith being fired in back-to-back seasons after one season. That sucks. But also, I would say that, get paid not to work, which, obviously you want to have your jobs, but Cliff Kingsbury signed a 6-year contract, and now he doesn't have to work for the rest of that time. Yeah. He's going to be made in the shade, like just living in that nice house of his in Arizona.
He's going to be hanging out with Sean. He's going to call Sean McVay when he leaves LA. Hey, Sean, come over. And yeah.
I would not, if Sean McVay somehow stays in LA, which I think he should. There's been rumors that Cliff Kingsbury would join him as the offensive coordinator with the Rams, so I could see that happening. But yeah, we talked about it before. I thought Lovie Smith was going to get fired, but the way that it was done, I respect the hell out of him for if he knew he was going to get axed and just wanted to win that game as a final fuck you to the Texans and go for 2 and win that game. You lose the number 1 pick. Kudos to Lovie.
Do it, yeah. Do it because I felt really bit. So I have family who are Texans fans, Texans season ticket holders actually, and I just told them the whole season. I was like, I feel horrible for Lovie Smith. He's got maybe the least desirable coaching job right now in the league. He's put in this horrible situation, and he's expected to bring stability and leadership and all these things, and the roster is so subpar. So for him to go out and win that game, and I think at that point you kind of know you're going to get axed, right? I mean, a lot of coaches in that situation, they know that they're not going to be asked to come back during the offseason of next year. So if he knew that and he just went for it, good for him. But he'll land on his feet somewhere. He's a respectable head coach, and he does the right things as a head coach. He's just in a god-awful position there in Houston. So it's happening, and it seems to happen every year. I felt really bad for Brian Flores last year with the Dolphins. I thought he did dirty real bad. I thought Lynn got a really raw deal with the Chargers years ago.
Lynn,
and it has worked out for the Chargers, but I still thought he didn't get a good deal with the way he was sent off. So it happens. It's the life of NFL and pro sports for coaching for sure. But some of these jobs, when that starts happening and it's such a high attrition rate, it's kind of like, man, who the hell's going to want to go coach for you? Who's established?
Well, yeah, that's the thing with the Arizona Cardinals right now. With they're paying Cliff Kingsbury to go away. They they also fired Steve Keim, and now they got to find a coach that's willing to take on that team that not going to have Kyler Murray for most of that season. I you know,
Yeah,
unless the doctors tell me otherwise, I'm under the assumption that Kyler Murray is going to miss most of 2023 with a torn ACL. And there's rumors that Vance Joseph could get that job. But that to me would be the same situation as a David Culley or a Lovie Smith, where you just bring in a guy for one season because he wants the opportunity. And then once they get good, you're going to axe them. That
yeah.
would be just like, we don't have a lot of options. This job isn't appealing. Let's just get a good guy to take on the team, and then we'll move on to the next coach. That's what that reeks of, in my opinion. But
It's
yeah,
where they just need someone who's done the job before, can come in, do it, and you can just kind of let them do their thing.
but you see, Sean Payton has interviewed with the Arizona Cardinals, the Indianapolis Colts, the Denver Broncos. Jim Harbaugh is interviewing with the Denver Broncos and the Colts. This one intrigued me. David Shaw interviewed with the
Yeah.
Denver Broncos yesterday. You know, if I was Sean Payton, I wouldn't want to take any of those jobs. I for Sean Payton to be in a good situation, it's got to be with a quarterback that's already established. I know he went on Fox and said ownership's a big deal to him. He wants the quarterback. So, in my opinion, I think this playoff weekend is very interesting to him because you and I have talked about this before. If the Chargers lose and if the Cowboys lose, I think it's a fight of who's gonna get Sean Payton.
Yeah. Who's going to
You could
fire their guy and go hire Sean?
because you could justify, if they win, okay, keep going, Brandon Staley, Mike McCarthy. And I don't know if Sean Payton, wants to fix Dak Prescott. There's not a whole lot to fix with Justin Herbert. So that's the spot I think he wants. But also you wonder about Brandon Staley playing his guys so long against the Denver Broncos when they had nothing to play for, and now Mike Williams may not even play in that playoff game against the Jaguars. And a lot of questions with Brandon Staley. I think he's not ready for this. He got them to the playoffs, but I don't really know him as a head coach. I think the Chargers is that spot for Sean Payton. But it's interesting, from David Shaw. I think David Shaw would be a great head coach in the NFL. I've been waiting for him for so long to leave Stanford and become a head coach. I think he'd be great. But also, is Denver the spot for him? Because it could be a shit ton of pressure for him to fix Russell Wilson.
Russell. Yeah.
And it's not like David Shaw, I've ever known him to be a quarterback whisperer. Like, he's had good offenses before, but I'm not really expecting him to be the guru to make Russell Wilson have the second wave of his career. And then Jim Harbaugh, Jim belongs at college, in my opinion. So that's what I feel about as far as those three spots and those three guys that are interested in coming back to the NFL. But another guy, D'Amico Ryans, who's the defensive coordinator for the 49ers. We're all thinking about the Houston Texans because that's his former team. I was not aware that he sued the Texans back in the day for, I guess, an injury that happened that hurt his Achilles and kind of ended his career abruptly. And I've heard rumors that he's not interested in the Texans job. So we'll see how these not quarterback, these head coaching hires hire in the offseason. But it's going to be very fascinating with Sean Payton being out there, two college coaches or former coaches, and former coach David Shaw, a current coach, and Jim Harbaugh. D'Amico Ryans is probably the biggest coordinator that's his name's out there. And then you got Sean McVay, who may just want to hang it up and go do the Amazon Prime gig.
For McVay, if he sees kind of what us from the outside are seeing, where it's going to be very hard to make LA competitive unless they have everything break their way for the Rams, then yeah, maybe go hang out on Amazon Prime for a while and just enjoy the fact that you won a Super Bowl and you're a cool coach and all this stuff. It is kind of real quick about David Shaw. That's like the guy, the golden goose. Everybody's just been waiting for him, and he never takes that job. Keeps his name kind of alive in the NFL circles in terms of fandom by being on those NFL draft telecasts and things like that.
Great on those.
He's awesome on those, and I think everybody respects Shaw and thinks that, man, that guy would be a heck of a head coach. Harbaugh, I don't know if he could come back to the NFL and have this same kind of success that he did at one point with the 49ers. And if he went to the Colts, it's a nice story because it's him and there's a reunion, but I don't see it. And why the hell would he want to leave Michigan? He has Ohio State's number right now. He can't win a damn playoff game, but he can get there. So that's pretty good. And the other thing about especially the NFC West it's kind of sad. We're seeing our bro coaching division kind of fall apart. Kingsbury, and then rumors about McVay and what he's going to do, and the only cool guy left is going to be Shanahan for San Francisco. So the three bro division, it's gone. It's the end of an era, maybe.
But don't sleep on the OG surfer bro and Pete Carroll. So
well, yeah, the OG. So he was kind of the OG surfer bro, and then the three Hawaii 5-0 guys who were like, hey, yo, what's up? But that whole era, I guess, is kind of over, and it is what it is. But Sean Payton about the Cowboys and the Chargers, I think Jerry Jones will axe McCarthy immediately if they lose to the Buccaneers. I don't see him putting up with that, and Jerry's desperate, and he acts that way, and he kind of even talks about it. He's like, "We got to win now. We got to win now. I got all these great players. We got to win." With the Chargers, I think they would have to be a one and done to do the same thing and have some real assurances that they'd be able to get Sean Payton. And I bet Sean Payton would tell them if they were one and done, like, hey, yeah, I really like your quarterback, and all I got to do is to get him to start throwing touchdown passes again. That's pretty easy because I can scheme him to do that.
I don't think that he's made any, he's made it pretty known, I think, to people in the close circles with him that he wants to coach the Chargers. I think maybe he's just hesitant about the ownership with Dean Spanos and everything.
Yeah, it's an ownership group that is, well, they don't have their own stadium. They're paying rent to play somewhere else. They are wishy-washy about a lot of things. But I think there's a very real possibility that somehow Jerry Jones just says, what's your number? I will give you 10% more than that, and you're my coach. You're my coach of the Dallas Cowboys, and you go get Dakota Prescott to win a Super Bowl. So I can see that happening.
Yeah, no, I can see that happening too. But the only thing I wonder is if Jerry's like, could I save money just having Kellen Moore be my next head coach?
Oh God, he could do that too. That's the other side of things. But let's not think like that. let's think it'll be a sweepstake between Dallas and the Chargers. But both are very attractive places for him to go. And the other coaches that we kind of mentioned, I don't really think, other than David Shaw, there's one, and DeMeco Ryans. Outside of those two, I don't really know if anybody really wants to mess around with Harbaugh. Jim Irsay's crazy enough where he might do it. But
he might.
Yeah, but that's about it. And the Denver situation, I don't see a lot of coaches wanting to go resurrect their coaching or come back after a layoff and have to deal with what's going on there. Defense is nice, got some nice skilled players, but you got to deal with Russell Wilson and what he's turned into.
Yeah. Nope, I agree. And it'll be interesting to see what happens with the Chargers and Cowboys. So before we get out of here, Alon, I want to get your opinions on your opinion on all the games this weekend. Is there one, and we'll pick the spreads as well, is there one game that stands out amongst the six that you think is the most intriguing?
Chargers-Jaguars. It's my favorite quarterback matchup. Lawrence against Herbert. Both guys can sling it. Both guys are gutsy as hell. I just think that's going to be a really fun game.
By far, probably the best quarterback matchup, because if we went through it, you got Geno Smith versus Brock Purdy, a matchup that no one saw coming if the season started, or once the season started. You didn't think Geno Smith was going to be the starter. You didn't think that Brock Purdy was going to get in there. Later that night, you got you got the good game with Justin Herbert versus Trevor Lawrence, the two young sunshine quarterbacks of the future.
Mm-hmm.
The next day, you got Josh Allen versus Skylar Thompson, and that takes kind of the fun of that matchup. You got Tyler Huntley maybe going for the Ravens against Joe Burrow, which we thought was going to be Lamar Jackson, but it sounds like that's not going to happen. You got later that night, the midday is Daniel Jones versus Kirk Cousins, and
that game's fun. That game's going to be fun.
It's going to be a fun game, but as far as the quarterbacks, I don't know what the Giants think of Daniel Jones. That's another team that could be in the mix for Derek Carr. Who knows if they want to upgrade? But Daniel Jones actually had a solid season. But I don't know if they want to pay him top dollar to be their quarterback. So we'll see about that. And then Monday night, you got Tom Brady versus Dak Prescott, which is a pretty good matchup. But I think by far the best quarterback matchup is Trevor Lawrence versus Justin Herbert.
That is where I think all the fireworks are going to be. I'm not saying it's going to be some massive shootout game. It doesn't have to be but those two quarterbacks are going to make some insane throws and
Definitely.
do some things to not get sacked that other quarterbacks who aren't them won't be able to do. That Cowboys Buccaneers game is a great matchup. I'm glad that's on Monday. It's all by itself, and it should be because it's the Cowboys against Tom Brady, so that'll be really fun. But out of the weekend games, besides the Chargers Jacksonville game, I do like that Giants Vikings game a lot, and because I think Daniel Jones has a real chance here. If he goes to Minnesota, beats the Vikings, who are really good, had an awesome season, and plays well, like maybe it does give them a little bit of thought in their brains, the ownership group, management group over there in New York, to be like, you know what, maybe this is our guy. We drafted him and we're going to stick with him. So I'm very curious to see how that game turns out. The other ones,
yeah, I mean it. When you make it Super Bowl wildcard weekend, you could get some duds here, but more football. It could lead to more exciting games, but I think we also get a lot of stinkers as far as the matchup. So let's go through them real quick, Alon, and I'll get your picks for all of the games. As far as the spreads and the straight-up winners, we got the Seattle Seahawks against the San Francisco 49ers. And the spread as of today, on Thursday, as we record this, is 10 for the Niners, and the over-under is at 42. So how do you see this one going?
I think Seattle covers, but they don't win. I think the Niners beat them. And I think it goes over 42 because Seattle's going to have to score to stay in that game.
Okay. Then we got that game Saturday night, I should say. We got the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Los Angeles Chargers in Jacksonville. And the Chargers at the moment are 1.5 point favorites, and the over-under is at 47.
I like the Jaguars to win outright, and I like that game going under.
All right. Then we got Sunday morning. And with Skylar Thompson starting for the Miami Dolphins, the Bills are 13.5 point favorites, and the over/under is 43.5.
Such a big number, but
yeah,
the Bills are going to cover it with Skylar Thompson being the quarterback. That's a huge number. I would never bet that number. That's such a bad number to go against.
And as far as the over/under, 43.5.
Bills are going to light them up. Let's go over.
Then we got the Sunday afternoon game with the Giants and the Vikings. Of course, earlier in the season, Christmas Eve, actually, a couple weeks ago, it took a 61-yard field goal for the Vikings to prevail over the Giants, and they are 3-point favorites again, with the over-under at 48.
I like the Vikings to win that game and to cover, and I will take the under in that game.
All right, and then we got Sunday night between the Baltimore Ravens and the Cincinnati Bengals. At the moment, Tyler Huntley is slated to start, but it could be also Anthony Brown having to fill in again, which could be terrible. Lamar Jackson, it sounds like he's not going to play. So it's the Bengals favored by 9.5, and the over-under is 40.5.
It's a very low number, but I just don't think the Ravens can score. I think that game goes under, and I think the Ravens do cover. I think they cover with Huntley playing, but they're not going to win.
All right, and then we got the Monday night game between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Dallas Cowboys. Tampa Bay Buccaneers playing at home because they won the NFC South, but they have a record of 8-9. And the Dallas Cowboys are 2.5 point favorites, and the over/under is at 45.5. There's only been 2 instances before in NFL history where a team that was below 500 won a playoff game. So is it going to happen again, Alon?
Was the last? Yeah, I think so. It is going to happen again. Was the last one the
Seahawks?
Yeah.
Well, that wasn't the last one. The Seahawks beat the New Orleans Saints with Quake, and then a couple of years after that, you had the Carolina Panthers, who won their division at 7-9 or 6-9-1, beating the Arizona Cardinals, who were playing with Ryan Lindley, their third-string quarterback.
I always forget about that one, and that's probably because Ryan Lindley played in that game. But I like the Buccaneers to win. and I like
All
them
right.
to both those teams go in the over. Probably be easier for the Raiders if the Buccaneers just decide to make it really easy and lose. But I just
Yeah.
you can't bet against Tom Brady at home. I don't care.
I get it. Well, we'll see how that goes for you. And Steven and I will wait till Saturday morning to pick our picks for the Super Wildcard weekend. Alon, thank you as always, my friend. Thank you for everything, for being such a gracious host in Las Vegas for that weekend. And thank you for the 8 hour drive back that night. I know you say it wasn't a big deal, but it was a big deal to me. So I really appreciate it, dude.
No problem, man. Anytime. So always willing to help a friend in need, and of course, anytime you need someone to fill in, I'm always here. So I know we couldn't do it yesterday, but today worked out perfectly. So
Perfectly.
I just hope we get some damn good football on Saturday and Sunday.
So do I, man. So do I. But you know what? I think we're gonna be all right. It's football regardless, so we'll have a good time.
It's not. I'm still pissed. The Niners are playing the first game. I think that's so stupid. I think they should be in prime time.
Kyle Shanahan agrees with you.
Yeah, Kyle Shanahan, smart man.
All right, guys, enjoy the games. Well, before you do that, join me and Steven this Saturday morning as we'll go through everything for just your pregame show, man. But until then, Alon, say what we always say on this fine show.
That's just your opinion, man.